usual explanation for when to use the present perfect simple is that it's for completed actions, whereas the present perfect continuous is for open-ended or ongoing activity. So when we use present perfect simple for completed actions, there's often this implication that the action leads to some kind of result. So, for example, if Tom says, "I've mended the car," the implication is that the car was broken before, but it's mended now. When we use the present perfect continuous for ongoing or open-ended activity, the focus is more on the time spent doing that activity. So if Tom says, "I've been mending the car," it explains his activity over a period of time. For example, he could say he's been mending the car for 3 hours or all afternoon or something like that, but we don't know if the car is working now or not. Activity described using the present perfect continuous may have a result, but it'll normally be a result of the amount of time spent on the activity. So, for example, if Tom has spent a long time mending the car, he may be tired as a result, or something like that. That explanation works fairly well in most situations, but there are some cases in which we need to dig a bit deeper. Stative verbs are an obvious exception. Verbs like know or like or seem are not normally used in the continuous form. So we would say, for example, "I've known him for 5 years," not "I've been knowing him," and so on. And the rules for verbs which are sometimes stative and sometimes active, like think or see or have, are basically the same in the perfect aspect as they are in the simple aspect. So in a context where we'd say "I have" in the present simple form of the verb, then we'd say "I've had" in the present perfect aspect. So, for example, we'd say "I have a car now," and we'd say "I've had a car for 10 years in the present simple and present perfect respectively. Equally, "I'm having trouble with the engine" in the present simple, and "I've been having trouble with the engine" in present perfect. There's nothing terribly difficult about all that. Maybe it is difficult, but at least the rules are fairly clear and consistent. The problem area, the area I'd like to focus on in this video, is with verbs that typically refer to something that continues over a period of time. Verbs like live or work or study. We can say,
"I've lived in Paris for 10 years.
For example, using the present perfect simple aspect, or we can say,
"I've been living in Paris for 10 years.
in the present perfect continuous. But what's the difference? Well, one of the reasons why I feel this is a problem actually comes from textbooks and websites that get it wrong. How many times have I come across the idea that if someone says "I have lived in Paris for 10 years, it means or it implies that they're not going to continue living there and that they're going to leave and live somewhere else? And how often have I seen it said that "I have been living in Paris for 10 years suggests that the speaker is going to continue to live in Paris? I've seen it much too often, and it is wrong. It's completely wrong. Let me show you why. I'm going to go onto Google here and do an exact phrase search for the two expressions "I have been living" and "it's time for a change." Look at the results. "I've been living solo for the past 5 years and feel it's time for a change." "I have been living for other people, but now I know it's time for a change." "I have been living here for 25 years, but I think it's time for a change." And in all of these cases, we've got native speakers using the present perfect continuous form "I have been living" in the context of planning to change where or how they live. So clearly, we do not use "I have been living" in a certain way or a certain place to indicate that we intend to carry on living in that way or that place. It can mean that, but it doesn't have to. Now let's try the opposite and do a search for I have lived and I will stay. Now this one actually takes me through to a song, the lyrics of which include the words, I have lived here since '85, I will stay here, I will not go. So again, we can't say that if someone says, I have lived somewhere, it carries the suggestion that that person will not continue to live there. That explanation simply doesn't work. So how can we explain it? Well, let's go back to the basic explanation of the difference between the simple and continuous forms of the present perfect. Let's remember that the simple form focuses on the action and the continuous form focuses on the activity, the process. In the case of living in Paris, working in a factory or studying economics or something like that, in most contexts, there isn't really much difference between the action and the activity. If I say I've lived in Paris for 10 years, it means I've completed 10 years of living in Paris. And if I say I've been living in Paris for 10 years, it means that the activity of living in Paris has continued for 10 years. There isn't really much difference, and we could say either in most contexts. So, are there any contexts in which it does make a difference, where the continuous form would be preferred over the simple form or vice versa? Yes, there are a few. Suppose I'm in London and I bump into an old friend and he says, "Hey John, I haven't seen you for ages. Where have you been?" Now the question is clearly focused not on any completed action, but on my activity during the period of time that he hasn't seen me. So in this situation, I would naturally answer, I've been living in Paris. That tells my friend what he needs to know to explain why he hasn't seen me for so long. I've lived in Paris would sound strange in this context. Conversely, if, when I am an old man in my rocking chair, my grandchildren come and sit beside me and ask, "What have you done in your life, Grandad?" Well, they would be focusing on completed actions when they ask that question. Things I have done. So, in this case, the continuous form would sound strange, and I would naturally answer in the simple aspect. I've had a wonderful life. I've lived in Paris and Rome and Tokyo. I've had lots of good friends and happy times, and so on. To find out more, check out my YouTube playlist on the perfect forms of the verb, especially this one, which contrasts I've lived in the present perfect with I lived in the past simple, and this one, which looks at the negative form of the present perfect simple and the present perfect continuous. I hope this video has helped you to understand the difference between the simple and continuous forms of the present perfect. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, or at least to this playlist. And if there's a grammar topic you'd like me to talk about, to make a video about, don't be shy about asking me.